The police received a frantic report of a man buried alive in a remote valley, setting in motion a series of events that none of them could have foreseen. That fateful day, the 911 operator's shift began like any other, but it would soon take a horrifying turn. At 2:35 p.m., the operator received a call that sent shivers down her spine. On the other end, a woman's voice trembled with fear, each word soaked in desperation. "Someone please. My husband. He's been buried alive. You have to hurry. Please, there's no time." The woman's sobs were so intense, the operator had to ask her to repeat herself, hoping against hope she had misheard. But she hadn't. The woman claimed her husband had been buried somewhere deep in a secluded valley, his fate hanging by a thread. The dispatcher immediately relayed the information to the nearest police unit, stressing the urgency of the situation. Time was running out. Within minutes, the police and emergency responders were racing down the winding roads, following the directions the woman had given them. She rode with them in the front seat, her knuckles white as she clutched a small piece of paper, her eyes hollow with dread. It seemed impossible, surreal even, that someone could be buried alive, especially in a place as serene as this valley, known more for its scenic beauty than its potential horrors. As they arrived, the valley stretched out before them, peaceful under the late afternoon sun. The rolling hills and thick trees cast long shadows on the ground, the wind gently swaying the grass. But there was nothing tranquil about the atmosphere anymore. The urgency of the call hung over them like a thick cloud. The ground appeared undisturbed, no obvious sign of where a man might be buried, no mound of earth, no fresh digging. The officers spread out across the valley, searching desperately for any clue. They brought out dogs trained to detect human scent, shovels, and metal detectors in case there was something hidden beneath the surface. But every passing minute felt like a race against time, the clock ticking ominously in their heads. The woman stood by, wringing her hands, whispering prayers under her breath as the officers scoured every inch. After what felt like an eternity, one officer, his sharp eye catching something peculiar, noticed a small area where the soil seemed looser, slightly different in color. It was subtle, so subtle that it might have been missed entirely if not for his meticulous nature. His heart quickened as he crouched down and sifted the soil between his fingers. "This was it, over here," he shouted. In an instant, the other officers rushed over, and the digging began. With every shovelful of earth removed, the tension mounted. Was the man still alive? Had they come too late? Was this even the right spot? Then, suddenly, their shovels hit something solid. A collective gasp rippled through the group. They cleared the dirt as quickly as they could, revealing a wooden coffin, crudely made, with nails haphazardly driven in, as if the person responsible had been in a rush. The officers exchanged anxious glances. Using a crowbar, one officer pried open the lid. Inside, they found a man, his face pale, his breath shallow, but he was alive. Barely, his eyes blinked in the sudden burst of light, weak but conscious. He had been buried alive, and yet, against all odds, he had survived. The woman collapsed in relief, sobbing uncontrollably. The officers worked quickly to pull the man from the makeshift grave, administering oxygen and checking his vitals. He had survived a nightmare, entombed beneath the earth, clinging to life by a fragile thread. As he was taken away on a stretcher, his hand briefly grasped his wife's, a silent testament to the terror he had endured and the miracle that had just occurred. But as the ambulance pulled away, one question lingered in the minds of everyone present: who had buried him and why? The case was far from over, and as the investigation began, dark secrets from the valley's past started to surface, secrets that would take the officers down a path more twisted and chilling than they could have imagined. The rescue had been nothing short of miraculous, but the air of relief was soon replaced by an unsettling sense of dread. Who had done this, and why bury the man alive? These questions loomed large as the investigators took stock of the eerie scene. The valley, once a peaceful and picturesque place, now felt haunted by the weight of something much darker. As officers roped off the area and continued searching for clues, The rescued man was rushed to the hospital, still too weak to speak. His wife, pale and trembling, rode with him, clinging to his hand as if she might lose him all over again. But as the ambulance disappeared from view, the officers knew their work was far from over. Detective Olivia Mercer, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving the most baffling cases, arrived shortly after. She was briefed on the situation and immediately felt the weight of its strangeness. Something about the scene didn't add up. The absence of footprints, the lack of disturbance in the soil except for that one small patch, it all felt too clean, too orchestrated. Someone had buried the man with precision, knowing it would be difficult to find him. But why leave just enough of a clue for them to notice? Mercer approached the site of the dug-up coffin, squatting beside it and examining the wood. It was rough and weathered, as if it had been hastily constructed, but with one purpose in mind: to entomb someone. Her fingers traced the edges of the lid where the nails had been pried open, and she felt a chill. There was something off about the placement of the nails, as if someone had done this in a hurry or worse, with cold calculation. How long was he down there? She asked one of the officers. Maybe 12 to 16 hours, at least according to the doctors. It's a miracle he's still alive, the officer replied. The coffin wasn't airtight, but he was running out of oxygen fast. Mercer nodded, her mind racing. The fact that he had survived seemed almost intentional, as if someone had wanted him to be found just in time. But who would play such a cruel game? She pulled on gloves and began examining the loose soil more closely. Something caught her eye, a faint glimmer in the dirt, just under the surface. Gently, she brushed away the dirt and uncovered a small, metallic object, a key. Its ornate design was out of place, too delicate for the rugged terrain of the valley. It was as if it had been left there on purpose, a clue meant to be found. "Bag this," she said, handing it to the forensics team. She couldn't shake the feeling that this key was part of a larger puzzle. Hours later, after questioning the wife and piecing together bits of information from neighbors and acquaintances, a disturbing picture began to emerge. The man, whose name was Michael Turner, was a well-respected figure in the community, a teacher at the local high school with no known enemies. But as Mercer dug deeper, she found whispers of something darker, a falling out with an old friend, rumors of a financial dispute, and even an unconfirmed affair. Back at the hospital, Michael was slowly regaining his strength. When Mercer visited him, he was hooked up to machines, his voice a faint rasp. His wife sat beside him, her face lined with worry. Mercer pulled up a chair, her notepad ready, though she had a feeling that Michael's answers would raise more questions. "Mr. Turner," she began softly, "can you tell me anything about who might have done this to you?" Michael closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to push through the fog of trauma. When he opened them again, there was fear in them, deep, unshakable fear. "I don't know," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I can't remember anything after being taken, but it was someone I know." Mercer leaned in closer, sensing the weight of his words. "Who, Michael? Who did this to you?" His eyes flicked to his wife, who was now trembling beside him. Slowly, he looked back at Mercer and whispered a name that sent a jolt of electricity through the air. It was Benjamin. Benjamin Price. Mercer froze. Benjamin Price. That name wasn't just familiar, it was notorious. Price was a former business partner of Michael's who had disappeared a year ago after being accused of embezzlement. He had been a rising star in the tech industry, but after the allegations surfaced, he'd vanished, leaving behind nothing but ruined lives and speculation about his whereabouts. The revelation was chilling. If Benjamin Price had resurfaced, it could mean trouble far beyond this one man's burial. Price had always been known for his meticulous planning, and if he had orchestrated this, it was only the beginning. But the more Mercer thought about it, the more something gnawed at her. Why would Benjamin bury Michael alive, only to leave enough of a trail to ensure he was found? This wasn't about murder, this was about sending a message. As Mercer left the hospital and stared out at the darkening sky, she knew one thing for certain: whatever this twisted game was, it was far from over. And Benjamin Price was somewhere out there, watching. Detective Olivia Mercer left the hospital with a growing sense of unease. The name Benjamin Price echoed in her mind like a ghost from the past. As she made her way back to the station, the pieces of the puzzle began to align in ways she didn't like. Price wasn't the type to leave loose ends or act on impulse. Everything he did had a reason. If he was back and had targeted Michael Turner, it meant one thing: this was personal, and the game was just beginning. At the station, Mercer wasted no time in pulling up the case file on Benjamin Price. The man had been a rising star tech genius with a string of successful ventures. He and Michael had been business partners in a startup, once inseparable. But everything had changed when Price was accused of siphoning money from the company. Michael had testified against him in court, sealing his fate. Price had vanished before sentencing, and despite multiple efforts to track him down, he had seemingly disappeared without a trace, until now. Mercer's eyes scanned through the file-old photographs of Price, grainy security footage from the last known sighting, and a series of legal documents. Then, something caught her attention. There had been a mysterious series of transactions from an offshore account linked to Price just 2 weeks ago. The amounts were large, and the destination unknown. The money had disappeared into the abyss of the digital world. But one thing was clear: Price had access to resources, and he was playing a long game. She leaned back in her chair, letting the gravity of it all sink in. If Benjamin Price had orchestrated Michael's burial, then this wasn't just about revenge. It was psychological warfare. Burying someone alive, only to have them saved in the nick of time, was a power move. It was a demonstration of control, a chilling message to Michael and anyone who had crossed him: I'm back, and I can reach you wherever you are. But why now? What had triggered Price's reappearance after all this time? Just as Mercer was contemplating her next move, her phone buzzed. It was the forensics team. "Detective Mercer, we've got something on that key you found," the voice on the other end said. "It's not just any key, it's a custom-made antique, designed for a specific kind of lock. We traced it to a vault." "A vault?" Mercer asked, intrigued. "What kind of vault?" "One that's part of a private estate, an old mansion just outside the city. The mansion's been abandoned for years, but the vault was registered to Benjamin Price." A chill ran down Mercer's spine. An abandoned mansion, a vault, and a key? It sounded like something out of a twisted fairy tale. And if the key led to this vault, then there was no doubt in her mind whatever Benjamin Price was planning, it was centered around that place. Without hesitation, she assembled a team. They would search the mansion, but they had to proceed with caution. If Price was hiding out there, it could be a trap. As they drove through the winding countryside roads toward the old mansion, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the land. The mansion came into view, a hulking, decrepit structure that loomed over the valley like a forgotten relic. Its windows were broken, and ivy crawled up its walls, giving it an air of abandonment and decay. They parked the cars a distance away, moving in silently. The tension was palpable, each step filled with the weight of what they might find inside. The team split up, some checking the perimeter while Mercer and a few officers approached the front entrance. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit hallway lined with dusty portraits and rotting furniture. It smelled of dampness and forgotten memories. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence: the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of the wind outside. Mercer led the way, flashlight in hand, scanning the hallway for any sign of recent activity. Then, in the distance, she saw a set of heavy wooden doors at the far end of the corridor. She approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. As she got closer, she realized there was a faint humming sound coming from behind the doors, like machinery. "Here," she whispered to the officers, "this is it." With a deep breath, she inserted the antique key into the lock. It fit perfectly, turning with a satisfying click. The doors swung open to reveal a large underground room, dimly lit by a series of old-fashioned lights hanging from the ceiling. At the center of the room was a large metal vault, just as the forensics team had described. But that wasn't all. Surrounding the vault were various items, a collection of old documents, photographs, and what appeared to be surveillance equipment. Mercer's blood ran cold as she realized what she was looking at. Benjamin Price hadn't just been watching them. He had been planning this for years. As they moved closer, one of the officers noticed something on the far wall, a set of monitors, each showing different live feeds. Some were of the valley, others of Michael's house. And one feed, in particular, showed something that made Mercer's heart stop. It was a live video of Price himself, standing in a dimly lit room, his face half hidden in shadow. He was watching them. Suddenly, the monitors flickered, and Price spoke, his voice smooth and calculated. "Hello, Detective Mercer. I've been expecting you." The vault door behind them began to close with a loud clang. Mercer lunged forward, but it was too late. The heavy door sealed shut, trapping them inside the room. Alarms blared, and the lights began to flicker erratically. Price's voice echoed through the room. "Welcome to the final chapter of my game. Let's see if you're clever enough to escape before time runs out." Mercer's heart raced. They were trapped in Benjamin Price's lair, and the clock had just started ticking.